You mentioned that usually shamans are the last. A shaman is the last person who a client is.
Good point.
Coming to for advice nowadays.
Yes.
And that's how I was wondering if they are coming to you also with physical issues or just.
Absolutely.
Keith, I have a terrible, I don't know, leg pain for 2 weeks and I don't know what to do. So
people keep coming to me with cancer. So in other words, it goes from as unusual as a person feels really weird and they don't seem to have any energy and they can't really function anymore. In other words, like weird stuff we can't really put our hands on very easy to, I've got 2 months to live. So I get everything between these extremes. Absolutely. Yeah. So some people come with life or death, some people come with, I just don't know what to do with myself. I've got a problem.
But
yes.
For sure that the doctors can't help and painkillers don't help. And
yes, that's right, either the problem they're suffering from is something that can't be understood by the medical profession, or it's something that the medical profession, like the 2 months to live one, it's like they've given up. Yes.
And the guides and the helpers, I want to ask if they can give anything different in methods, in approach, in anything. In this case, it's for these issues or for these questions.
Absolutely, because the conventional methods have failed in whatever capacity, like it's outside our remit, or we tried all the drugs and the other things and none of them worked, and anything in between. The guides and the helpers between them have the ability to access whatever is required to effect the healing with the person. And so I'm going to introduce what is perhaps the most painful thing about being a shaman, because what happens for me is I can walk down the streets and I can go into the town centre and I can see people and I'm looking at them, but I'm also seeing them, and I can see the negative energies roiling around, giving them terrible times. I can see the physical illnesses they're suffering from. It's very painful. And what I have to accept is that a lot of people won't actually approach someone who needs the help. What's even more painful for a shaman is the people that go to you and ask for help, and then they say, oh, but I don't want this and I don't want that, and I'm not doing this and I'm not doing that. That is very, very challenging. And what we have to accept, which we do with time, is that everyone has got a right time. So now this was on your list, but you haven't spoken about it. What about if a shaman sees a person with a serious condition, whether physical or otherwise? Can the shaman do some work on that person without being a client? Absolutely not. Why? It is a violation of their free will. They are a sovereign human being. It is inappropriate for anyone to do healing for someone if they don't want it. Because for all we know, their soul journey could include having an illness, getting a terminal diagnosis, having all sorts of suffering experiences, and leaving their physical body behind and going somewhere else to do something. Now, I didn't say this earlier, but some of the guides that work with shamans are people that used to be alive and are now passed into spirit. So I have one that's a Native American guide, and I have one that had a lifetime in Britain in the Middle Ages as a monk formerly. So that gives you an idea. Yeah. If we were to do the healing work for that person without their consent, we would be violating their free will and denying them some essential experience that we would not have any idea about. There are some people, certain Reiki practitioners, who do not understand this. So what you get in your training as a shaman is you get shamanic ethics. This is so essential, and this is laid on the line. My teacher made us completely clear of the score, and when I train people, it's exactly the same thing. In these situations, you can healing. In this situation, you perceive what you perceive, and you shut up. Very important. And this is about the doing as you're told thing. Yeah.
That must be really hard.
When you know how much suffering is engendered, yes. And it's respect for the person's life journey. That's before everything.
Back to the clients, because it was in the beginning of our conversation. you talked about your skepticism and your
Yes.
your cynicism.
Yes.
You also talked about clients who told you that yes, I want to change, but deep down you started the healing, and you could see that the person deep down doesn't want any change.
Yes.
I suppose, or not I suppose, I wonder if it's easier, let's say, to handle when somebody approaches you with skepticism, when they are cynical or skeptic on the surface, or does that happen often to you? When they approach you with saying that I don't really believe in it, but please try to help me.
Yes, your question is very amorphous. I'm going to see if I can condense it a bit. So there's my skepticism when I began my training and a bit of cynicism, and then there's the clients in that same state, and how does that affect everything? I was trained by going to university and studying science. So I was trained as a rational scientist, and I practiced as a rational scientist working as a medical scientific officer in medical pathology in hospitals, and that was my experience many years before I began my shamanic path. I discovered that's very, very useful. I have a very good grasp of science that most people don't have. Most people are very flaky and fluffy with science, and a lot of people actually believe things that scientists say, and they've not bothered to think things through. And actually, a lot of the time when scientists say things, they've not really rigorously followed the method, and that might not actually be the case. So I have an advantage there. So I'm very grateful for my skepticism. When it comes to the client having the skepticism, this is the way that we address this. First of all, they request the healing, and when they do that, they're giving the permission the first time. The second thing that happens is when the healing is done and the report has been written and sent, they have the opportunity to activate that healing work by saying some simple words of power, so then they can activate it as well. But I'm being instructed to remind myself of one particular person in Montreal in Canada. At that point I was living in northwest Spain, and he asked for the USR, did the USR, 2 to 3 weeks went by, and he emailed, thank you very much, but nothing much has happened. So with my partner at that particular point, we read the email together, had a little look about it, and I sent another email, and he got the healing kadunk from the second email, which he didn't get from the report. This is a fairly unusual example. He became so passionate about everything that he then chose to go on a retreat, working with the plant medicines, and he booked it on the internet, and he booked to go to Manchester, which was the nearest airport. And he got on a plane, and when he got off the plane, he had to change twice. When he got off the plane, he stopped in a place in America. He got on another plane, stopped in another place in America, and got another place, stopped in another place in America. He was in Manchester, USA, not Manchester, UK. This was a problem. The guy's unbending intent was so fierce and so powerful. He'd had his USR, nothing was stopping him. He then flew back to the first place, changed again, flew back to the second place, changed again, flew back to the third place, back to Montreal where he started. He's Facebooking all his friends when this is going on. This is this crazy journey I'm doing. He then gets on another aeroplane, not to Manchester, England, no, he gets on an aeroplane to Zurich in Switzerland. He changes at Zurich and gets on an aeroplane from Zurich to Manchester, UK. And while that's all being going on, two of his friends say, right, we're up for this, and they fly over as well. So there's 3 people from Montreal come on the retreat. So that's an example of the power of unbending intent and what happens when someone gets it. So resistance to healing, it would be lovely if it didn't exist, and it's really important to accept this as part of people's journey. And it's interesting how sometimes that resistance will just erode over circumstances, and other times, like my friend with the 2-year-old in the warehouse, it just wasn't happening. Compassion, it all comes down to compassion for people's journeys. Yes, very, very important. We do what we can, and we don't do what we can't. About the size of it, really.
Yeah, just you have to know when you need to step back.
Very much so, but it's easier because when you're working with the guides and the helpers, they are constantly assisting on that process.
Okay.
When to stand back, when to step in.
Mm-hmm.
So like with the guy, we did the USR, 2 to 3 weeks, the email came through, then the guys and helpers, right, look at the email, have a little chat with your partner about it, see what comes up in your conversation, send an email back, bidding, got it. Yeah, so you need to be sensible in that way. So the question you haven't asked is, let's look at the morphology of these guides in a bit of detail. I'll name them. My first guide was called Jonathan. I encountered Jonathan doing a spiritualist church development circle many years before I became a shaman. And he connected with me. I didn't know it was a shamanic journey, it was a spiritualist church thing, but it worked. And he was dressed like a medieval monk with the habit, brown, and the beard and all this. I pretty much ignored him for 25 years. Not very clever, but I did. When I started my training, he came back very, very strongly. Ah, right, so you're finally ready, are you? God, it took you long enough. On my training, the first guide I met was Worm. Now, Worm has the capacity to do so many things, it would be a 45-minute conversation minimum just to describe Worm's capabilities. Worm can become so small, Worm can go into the energy body of a person and work on the client's DNA and transform the base pair sequences into alignment with the requirements of that person's higher self. On one extreme, on the other extreme, and this happened only recently, that I had a client that had negative energies that were so toxic and noxious that the usual methods failed. They all failed, and Worm went in there. The vortex was arranged, activated. Worm went in there and just totally engulfed and swallowed each one and pooped the energetic negative energy remains out. Something else that Worm can do is Worm can actually, now this came up in your question, we're going to have to do a little sidebar for this. The question is, what happens to people who have had something really horrible to happen to their soul part and you can't get them back? So what Worm can do is Worm can form a conduit between the realms I work in and anywhere in the universe and beyond, and make a huge tunnel, and when it's time to bring them back, they can all be brought back through Worm. So Worm can be so huge you can't even conceive of the size. Worm can be so minuscule as to be like submicroscopic. So I have guide DL, Native American extraction, likes to take the piss out of me and works with these green entities called nanites, and they do energy body scan and repair. I work with Rhino. Rhino is a protection and makes everything safe. The guide that was with Jonathan transmogrified into an extraterrestrial looking being with a silver colour and a special kind of elongated features. The brown robe went on it, became a silver robe. He's got this huge staff, he strikes it, and if anything really nasty is happening with black magic or anything really dodgy, total protection, total exclusion. He does many other things too. Let's not go into all the details. I've got the spirit of ayahuasca, and she turns the client's energy bodies bitter, which causes all the negative energies to want to get out. I've got Tahatl. Tahatl is another plant spirit, the spirit of the plant called Salvia divinorum. Salvia divinorum is a spirit plant that can connect me with the client's higher self, travelling into the upper world, and all information can be returned, and I write it all down. So that's that particular connection. Energy sphere has no physical form whatsoever. Energy sphere's function is to connect all of us very powerful with the client and make a really good strong connection. So that just gives you an idea of some of the guides in terms of what they look like, what they do.
So you can't always personalize them, the guides. They can be...
Exactly, they are the form that they reveal themselves to you in.